Call to the Nations. Extracts from the writings of Shoghi Effendi. Well is it with him who fixeth his gaze upon the order of Bahá'u'lláh, the Bab. It is towards this goal, the goal of a new world order, divine in origin, all-embracing in scope, equitable in principle, challenging it in its features, that a harassed humanity must strive. Foreword. Shoghi Effendi, Guardian of the Bahá'í Faith, in exercising his function of interpreting the Bahá'í Revelation, dwelt at a great length and with considerable emphasis on the world order enshrined within that revelation. Early in his ministry, which initiated the formative age of the faith, he alluded to those priceless elements of that divine civilization, the establishment of which is the primary mission of the Bahá'í Faith. And over the years, he indited a series of letters, gradually referred to as his World Order letters, unfolding this theme. The vital necessity of world order is largely acknowledged today, but the means to achieve it battle even its most passionate advocates. Meanwhile, the process of disintegration continues unchecked, and mankind's condition approaches the stage of despair. At this critical juncture, the Universal House of Justice, the international governing body of the Bahá'í Faith, feels moved to proclaim again the meaning and purpose of the Bahá'í message and its pertinence to our very existence on earth. It has therefore selected the following passages from Shoghi Effendi's World Order letters and offered them as a light and a guidance to all mankind in this dark period of our history, a period, nevertheless, whose distant horizon is brilliant with the promise of that most glorious day of all, foretold and sung throughout the ages by prophets, seers, and poets, and now actually dawning upon the harassed and desperate children of men. Introduction. The fundamental principle enunciated by Bahá'u'lláh, the followers of his faith firmly believe, is that religious truth is not absolute but relative, that divine revelation is a continuous and progressive process, that all the great religions of the world are divine in origin, that their basic principles are in complete harmony, that their aims and purposes are one and the same, and that their teachings are but facets of one truth, that their functions are complementary, that they differ only in the non-essential aspects of their doctrines, and that their mission represents successive stages in the spiritual evolution of human society. The aim of Bahá'u'lláh, the prophet of this new and great age, which humanity has entered, is not to destroy, but to fulfill the revelations of the past, to reconcile, rather than accentuate the divergences of the conflicting creeds which disrupt present-day society. His purpose, far from belittling the station of the prophets gone before him, or of whittling down their teachings, is to restate the basic truths which these teachings enshrine in a manner that would conform to the needs and be in consonance with the capacity and be applicable to the problems, the ills and perplexities of the age in which we live. His mission is to proclaim that the ages of the infancy and of the childhood of the human race are past, that the convulsions associated with the present stage of its adolescence are slowly and painfully preparing it to attain the stage of manhood, and are heralding the approach of that age of ages when swords will be beaten into plowshares, when the kingdom promised by Jesus Christ will have been established, and the peace of the planet definitely and permanently ensured. Nor does Baha'u'lláh claim finality for his own revelation, but rather stipulates that a fuller measure of the truth he has been commissioned by the Almighty to vouchsafe to humanity at so critical a juncture in its fortunes must needs to be disclosed at future stages in the constant and limitless evolution of mankind. The Bahá'í Faith upholds the unity of God, recognizes the unity of his prophets, and inculcates the principle of the oneness and the wholeness of the entire human race. It proclaims the necessity and the inevitability of the unification of mankind, asserts that it is gradually approaching, and claims that nothing short of the transmuting Spirit of God, working through his chosen mouthpiece in this day, can ultimately succeed in bringing it about. It, moreover, enjoins upon its followers the primary duty of an unfettered search after truth, condemns all manner of prejudice and superstition, declares the purpose of religion to be the promotion of amity and concord, proclaims its essential harmony with science, and recognizes it as the foremost agency for the pacification and the orderly progress of human society. It unequivocally maintains the principle of equal rights, opportunities and privileges for men and women, insists on compulsory education, eliminates extremes of poverty and wealth, abolishes the institution of priesthood, prohibits slavery, asceticism, mendicancy, and monasticism, prescribes monogamy, discourages divorce, emphasizes the necessity of strict obedience to one's government, exalts any work to perform in the spirit of service to the level of worship, urges either the creation or the selection of an auxiliary international language, and delineates the outlines of those institutions that must establish and perpetuate the general peace of mankind. The Bahá'í Faith revolves around three central figures, the first of whom was a youth, a native of Shiraz, named Mirza Ali Muhammad, known as the Bab, Gate, who in May 1844, at the age of 25, advanced the claim of being the herald who, according to the sacred scriptures of previous dispensations, must needs announce and prepare the way for the advent of one greater than himself, whose mission would be, according to those same scriptures, to inaugurate an era of righteousness and peace, an era that would be hailed as the consummation of all previous dispensation, and initiate a new cycle in the religious history of mankind. Swift and severe persecution, launched by the organized forces of church and state in his native land, precipitated successively his arrest, his exile to the mountains of Azerbaijan, his imprisonment in the fortress of Marku and Shirikh, and his execution in July 1850 by a firing squad in the public square of Tabriz. No less than 20,000 of his followers were put to death, with such barbarous cruelty as to evoke the warm sympathy and the unqualified admiration of a number of Western writers, diplomats, travelers, and scholars, some of whom were a witness to these abominable outrages and were moved to record them in their books and diaries. Mirza Hussain Ali, surnamed Baha'u'lláh, the Glory of God, a native of Mazindiran, whose advent the Bab had foretold, was assailed by those same forces of ignorance and fanaticism, was imprisoned in Tehran, was banished in 1852 from his native land to Baghdad, and thence to Constantinople and Adrianople, and finally to the prison city of Akka, where he remained incarcerated for no less than 24 years, and in whose neighborhood he passed away in 1892. In the course of his banishment, and particularly in Adrianople and Akka, he formulated the laws and ordinances of his dispensation, expounded in over 100 volumes the principle of his faith, proclaimed his message to the kings and rulers of both the East and the West, both Christian and Muslim, addressed the Pope, the Caliph of Islam, the Chief Magistrate of the Republics of the American continent, the entire Christian sacerdotal order, the leaders of Shia and Sunni Islam, and the high priests of the Zoroastrian religion. In these writings he proclaimed his revelation, summoned those whom he addressed to heed his call and espouse his faith, warned them of the consequences of their refusal, and denounced in some cases their arrogance and tyranny. His eldest son Abbas Effendi, known as Abdu'l-Bahá, the servant of Bahá, appointed by him as his lawful successor and the authorized interpreter of his teachings, who since early childhood had been closely associated with his father and shared his exile and tribulations, remained a prisoner until 1908, when, as a result of the Young Turk Revolution, he was released from his confinement, establishing his residence in Haifa. He embarked soon after on his 3-year journey to Egypt, Europe, and North America, in the course of which he expounded before vast audiences the teachings of his father and predicted the approach of that catastrophe that was soon to befall mankind. He returned to his home on the eve of the First World War, in the course of which he was exposed to constant danger until the liberation of Palestine by the forces under the command of General Allenby, who extended the utmost consideration to him and to the small band of his fellow exiles in Akka and Haifa. In 1921 he passed away and was buried in a vault in the mausoleum erected on Mount Carmel at the express instruction of Bahá'u'lláh for the remains of the Bab, which had previously been transferred from Tabriz to the Holy Land after having been preserved and concealed for no less than 60 years. The passing of Abdu'l-Bahá marked the termination of the first and heroic age of the Bahá'í Faith and signalized the opening of the formative age, destined to witness the gradual emergence of its administrative order, whose establishment had been foretold by the Bab, whose laws were revealed by Bahá'u'lláh, whose outlines were delineated by Abdu'l-Bahá in his will and testament, and whose foundations are now being laid by the national and local councils, which are elected by the professed adherents of the faith. This administrative order, unlike the systems evolved after the deaths of the founders of various religions, is divine in origin, rests securely on the laws, the precepts, the ordinances and institutions which the founder of the faith has himself specifically laid down and unequivocally established, and functions in strict accordance with the interpretations of the authorized interpreters of its holy scriptures. Though fiercely assailed ever since its inception, it has, by virtue of its character, unique in the annals of the world's religious history, succeeded in maintaining the unity of the diversified and far-flung body of its supporters, and enabled them to launch, unitedly and systematically, enterprises in both hemispheres, designed to extend its limits and consolidate its administrative institutions. The faith which this order serves, safeguards and promotes is, it should be noted, in this connection, essentially supernatural, supranational, entirely non-political, non-partisan, and diametrically opposed to any policy or school of thought that seeks to exalt any particular race, class, or nation. It is free from any form of ecclesiasticism, has neither priesthood nor rituals, and is supported exclusively by voluntary contributions made by its avowed adherents. Though loyal to their respective governments, though imbued with the love of their own country, and anxious to promote at all times its best interest, the followers of the Bahá'í Faith, nevertheless, viewing mankind as one entity and profoundly attached to its vital interests, will not hesitate to subordinate every particular interest, be it personal, regional, or national, to the overriding interests of the generality of mankind, knowing full well that in a world of interdependent peoples and nations, the advantage of the path is best reached by the advantage of the whole, and that no lasting result can be achieved by any of the component parts if the general interests of the entity itself are neglected.